Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Hulya Oztel. By way of introduction, I'm currently heading a suite of postgraduate courses centered on higher education, management, and leadership at Nottingham Trent University. But before that, most of my career was at De Montfort University, where I met some of our panel members that we will be meeting shortly, and where I looked at curricular innovation, creating links with industry. So I'm delighted to welcome you all today for this panel discussion celebrating International Women's Day. If you ask me, it shouldn't be a single day, but our conversation today will essentially center around the notion of gender bias in a range of industries. So without further ado, let me introduce our fantastic panel of incredibly talented women who actively promote inclusivity within their sector and industries. To start with, we have Leslie-Anne George. Welcome, Leslie-Anne. Leslie-Anne's graduated from De Montfort University in 2014 with a degree in business and management and law. I was still at De Montfort at the time. You are a seasoned professional services consultant and a senior project management professional within an industry that is generally dominated by men, and that is the engineering and technology industry.
That's right.
Yeah. Um, you're a STEM ambassador and a strong advocate for promoting the development of students and young adults by sharing experiences in industry. You're also an advisory board member at the Montfort University, and you've written Elevate Your Essay Writing Skills, which shows that you really care for students and how they do. Very warm welcome, Leslie-Anne.
Thank you, Julia. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So let's move. We also have joining our panel today Claire Benyon. So Claire graduated from the Montfort University in 2001. Very warm welcome, Claire.
Hello, welcome. Hi, lovely to be here.
Mm. So you completed a human resource management qualification at the Montfort, and since then um, joined Enterprise Rent a Car, where you're currently managing the talent acquisition marketing team. In terms of further introductions, I understand that within your corporation, you sit on the UK Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Council within Enterprise,
Yes, that's right.
alongside, and you're also involved with the Diversity Task Group at the Institute of Student Employers. Most recently, I believe you were recognized as an inspiring automotive woman of 2021. Congratulations.
Thank you, and it's great to be here.
Okay, so that was by Automotive 30% Club. Thank you very much, Claire, for joining us today. And I have the pleasure of also welcoming one of our current students. So Grace Grupwell joins us. Very warm welcome, Grace.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and also among you guys, like amazing women. So yeah, really nice to be here.
It's lovely to have you. You're one of our current, De Moffat University's current international student, and you're studying product and furniture design. You've been singled out as a class leader in arts and design, so very, very warm congratulations, Grace.
Thank you so much.
You're also a freelancer and teaching English overseas. So this is our panel. Very warm welcome to you all. Today, as I said, we are celebrating through this panel discussion International Women's Day. And I have a broad question to start this conversation, and it is basically, what do you think is gender bias? How did it manifest in your industry or in your experience? Let's find out a bit more about gender bias. And I'm happy to open the floor to whoever wants to go.
I'm happy to start off, Hulya, if that's okay. I'm coming from the automotive industry. As we all know, it's very male dominated, very masculine. And actually, when I graduated from De Montfort University, I had no idea that I'd end up working in the automotive sector. But I think sometimes there is that kind of stigma, and actually there's a lot going on within the industry that actually should encourage more women to apply and progress. And, you know, when I think about gender bias, I think gender bias can take many different forms, and I have experienced those in my career, being a mum of two young girls. You know, I've experienced the maternal bias, the assumption sometimes that maybe I'm not as dedicated to my career because I've had, you know, gone and had children. That's probably that affinity bias, you know, where sometimes our male counterparts might prefer or preference other men. But I would say it's more of an unconscious bias. I think it's still, that's the challenging part of the industry, and also really from a customer perspective, when I was an area manager and the expectation was the area manager would be a male. And I think it's the unconscious bias that we need to kind of work with, because I feel that's the hidden bias that is hard to sometimes identify and challenge and correct. So there's a lot going on in the industry. There's lots of support. We have some great women's networks, but I think it's just taking a lot of time to kind of get there. And our CEO is a woman, Chrissy. And you know, I think there's a lot of support we get at Enterprise as a top 50 employer for women, and have been for 16 years. But I think in the industry as a whole, there's still quite a way to go.
Thank you, Claire. You know, I know the notion of unconscious bias still prevailing and still being a barrier. Thank you so much. Any member of our panel would like to add their experiences to Claire's? wonder whether this resonates with some of the experiences of our panel members. You know, when you said that you were often in rooms where you were the youngest, the only female, and the only person of minority ethnic background, that relates to the notion of intersectionality that with which we conceptualize bias. You know, sometimes we can be discriminated against just on the basis of one attribute, but when there's an intersection of a range of attributes, it makes climbing the corporate ladder that much more more challenging, because you never know what type of bias you'll be facing at any point in time. You talked about the pay gap which persists, and that is very much the case in the higher education sector also. You know, we do have highly qualified women which represent practically half of the workforce in higher education, and lo and behold, only 29% of professors are female. What is happening? And at this point, it's really interesting to draw on some of the points that you made, Claire, and that you're making, Bijna, about stages in life and the need for HR policies to be malleable and adapted to the needs of women, you know, particularly when they have caring responsibilities in their mid-30s, for example, but also something we don't speak much about. And that is women in between ages of 45 and 55 leave the workforce in droves. And that is because there is no adaptation to deal with their experiences of the menopause. But let me
I was just going to say, sorry, Hulya, that actually it's the flexible arrangements for all employees, because we don't want to assume that the woman should take on that responsibility to be on an AWA or a flexible working arrangement. So I think, yes, there's more that we need to do for all the whole workforce to be able to adopt those flexible practices to support each other in the home, at home as well as in work. And you know, the HR policy is important, but we've got to have buy-in from our leadership teams in the industries, and it's got to come from us, our executives, our boards, as opposed to driven from sort of the HR perspective. To, you know, that's important, but you know, we're not going to get there unless we get buy-in from our leadership teams.
That's right.
So
And I'd sort of like to come in from the STEM perspective as well, because that is the industry that I'm in. And I can sort of echo what Bijna and Claire are saying as well, in the sense that you can be the only woman in the room and you're sort of saying something, but then another male says it, and then it's suddenly the best idea in the room, but you said it ages ago and it wasn't taken. So I suppose gender bias in that sense is when you basically prefer, as Bijna said, one gender over the other. And it's just sometimes it's an unconscious thing where you just have to educate people and also let them in. But I do understand from the individual standpoint as well, you have to start it from somewhere, because sometimes you have to meet each other bottom up and then sort of top down as well, so that they can sort of get to know the experiences of women, so that women can communicate, because they are experiencing it firsthand, what they are going through, for organizations to be able to implement the likes of the policies that Bijna and Claire have spoken of already. But it's just, and also enforcing things like sort of schemes or training that people can sort of enroll onto, and making them mandatory, because sometimes they don't realize that unconscious bias is there. But when they go on programs like that, they're like, I didn't know that I was like that. But, you know, it took that education piece to be able to say to them, well, this is what you've been doing for a long time and you didn't understand it, and this is the impact it's had on others, so that they can take that step back to sort of do something about it. So certainly from my perspective, when you don't see women there, you form a different opinion altogether, because I almost didn't go into engineering because I was told it was male dominant, sorry. And so it's not a woman's world, so you wouldn't even want to consider it. So for me, it was three female mentors who sort of guided me and stepped up and said, you know what, you can come and have a look at that. And that was like a project engineer, it was a project assistant, and a commercial director. They all took me under their wings to say, no, this is the different side of the story that you haven't seen. So I think it's sort of bringing a lot of that to light as well, so that a lot of females can see that, and that's things that organizations can also implement to ensure that we sort of break the bias in that sense.
Thank you, Leslie. And I think this aspect of mentoring and networking is a really important theme, and I suspect it will come through as we progress in our conversation. Grace, what is your approach to gender bias?
Yeah, for me, gender bias, well, it happens to both genders, right? To both sexes. And I understand that today we're talking about women. So it's basically like prejudices and how do you say it in English? Stereotypes. Like for example, but it can vary because there's like domestic, like you were talking Binja before. There's like the gender bias in the house and like in your private life, and then there's work and education. And I think it's very important to differentiate both of them because they're very different. I think at work it's much more subliminal, so you can't really see it, and then at home or like out in public, but in a private area, it's much more directed to you. And like stereotypes that I face at product design is when I talk about that I am doing product design, it's always this question, right? Especially from men, but are you doing BA or BSc? And I'm like, well, is that important? Like, if I was to say BSc, I'm doing BA, but it's to say, oh, it's not that important or it's not that hard. Like, don't worry about it. If I'm saying like, if I'm stressing out about a project or whatever. So I see that definitely, especially because I think they give more importance to engineering areas. And I've seen in BSc in product design at DMU that there's less women than men because it is a men's industry as well. Yeah.
Okay, again, really interesting. This distinction that bias can be cultural, really, that it can be present within our home and the societies within which we evolve, but also in the workplace. And perhaps workplaces can be shining lights and lighthouses almost. Driving change within society, particularly as we are so operating in at such a global scale. Thank you so much, Grace. My I won't summarize just yet, but I would like to move to our second questions because I feel like we have already started to touch upon this. And the second question was, well, how has bias impacted or what effects has it had on your education and your experience of industry? And I know we've touched upon this to some extent, but it would be really nice to sometimes to perhaps dig deeper and find out, explore how our experiences have been shaped through by bias.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I just wanted to sort of add on to that, that concept of you can't be what you can't see is so critical to your journey and your career. And I think at Enterprise and through my career, I've been extremely lucky to always have those female role models, to have a very passionate director in the business who would, if we were in a room full of men and the men asked the one woman to scribe, she would say, she would put her foot down and say, no, the women do not scribe, the women do not make the notes, and really kind of very powerful message that she would challenge in that room. But not everybody has those role models, and the importance of allyship within a business is absolutely crucial to have, if it's men in the business, but that understand the challenges and aware of those challenges in the business and can step in and challenge others' thoughts and behaviours is really critical. When you've got 20% sort of women at the top, it's 20% women at the top, it's just very hard to even adopt a mentoring program sometimes for the women coming in, so I think certainly at Enterprise we do the unconscious bias training, we do everybody goes through diversity, equity and inclusion training at every level in the company, so we're always challenging bias and challenging the thought processes of our team at every single level to make sure that awareness is the first step, I think, to making a change. But I think so. It's a brilliant point, Vishnu, that you made. So I just wanted to echo that.
Yes, certainly. I think the World Economic Forum indicates that it's going to take 108 years to close that gap.
Oh.
And that is just simply too slow, And in sharing my own experience, for example, I came into a new team and there were basically different projects. And my manager just said to me, he wanted me to take charge of one project. And the chair outright just went, if you're not attending, I don't want anyone else to attend. So then that's it. And so my manager, and obviously he had to put his foot down to say, well, then you're not going to have any representation from my team and you really need our support. So it's up to you. You make the call. And so he wasn't even willing to give me a chance. But when I came in and I did what I had to do, because my manager was indicating that you have to trust my judgment too, not just based on what you want. And so within a couple of months, he sent a message to my manager to say, wow, she's very efficient. But he wasn't even willing to give me that chance to prove that I can be efficient or whether I'm not. And so I think it's also sort of making more people aware of this, that these are things that they do either consciously or unconsciously. I guess probably mostly unconsciously because they don't see a lot of women around. And so the mind just says, okay, no, a man has been doing this for a long time. So, this is fit for a man. And so just changing those perspectives as well. And it goes a long way, not just in the workplace, but in the media as well. The way certain job types are sort of portrayed. And also for organizations to study the gender gap in the workplace. If there are certain roles where, it's just completely male dominant, you might sort of want to think or take a step back and assess to say, why is it that there are no women here? There's no female representation here, and make that conscious effort to say, okay, we are going to, tailor our recruitment programs to ensure that women are also included here. We're going to promote it in a different way to also ensure that, the women who are capable out there are also able to apply to these things. So I suppose these are all little steps that we can take to close the gender gap from an individual perspective and a corporate or organizational perspective as well.
Yeah,
Thank
I think
you.
the word that all three of you said is awareness. And I think because of the cultures, sometimes that can overlap and like different cultures can't understand like where we come from. For example, for me, like what I wanted to share was two different cultures, right? Spain from Mallorca, like a little island that we have like old traditions and like an old way of thinking, old. And like versus or in comparison to the UK. Like when I came here, I started to see these differences. I think it's like unacceptable. Like people here as a society I feel like they know that that's unacceptable, having gender bias, like especially with like actions or with what they say with verbally. Um, and that's something that I never experienced in Spain. Never. Like I've not even seen it with my parents, how the bosses of my mom treated her. Never seen it. And it's amazing, right? To come here, see the openness, and to actually see how people call out the people that are being quite biased. That is amazing. Like I experienced that at work when I started waitressing, and that was amazing to see that. And that wouldn't have happened in Spain because mostly the bosses there is male. So when you're in a higher hierarchy, sometimes
Mhm.
they don't have a space to actually share these things, and it's not acceptable. I mean, it's not like well seen to come and express how you're feeling in Spain. Like, and I also wanted to share that when I used to go to college there, I think it's called college, but basically when I was like 15 years old, más o menos, um, we were put in groups, and I was the only female in a group of males. And I remember giving like my point of view of this project, and I remember them looking at me, and some of them not even looking at me, and just like if I was an accessory in that group, and I wasn't like able to say anything with my voice, and I was nothing. And I remember actually, I remember very vividly how I used to look at life, and I was used to think that women could never be anyone important because we would always be behind men and always be like the rib of that person. Honestly, girls, that's what I used to think. I think my parents don't even know this, so hopefully they're not shocked. But yeah, that's how I used to feel. And then I came here. First year we got into groups, and also we were mixed, so there were men and women. And I remember putting out my idea, and everyone was actually onto it, and we put that on the board, so we kind of like had to sell it to our lecturers. And that was amazing to see that I had a voice and the different levels of consciousness and awareness that there is in different countries. And I think because in Spain you're grown up to for women to feel like they have to behave correctly, that they have to have a smaller voice. So the more, the less loud you are, the more cuter you are, and that's still around. And I think here in the UK they don't really mind that. You can be as loud as you want, as enthusiastic as you want. And I think some of the things that I never fit into society in Spain is because of that. Because I've always been loud. I've always said what I wanted to say, and that's something that's not really well seen. So yeah, this is why I'm really grateful for being in the panel and having the ability to talk about DMU and what I've experienced from here.
You've articulated this beautifully, this notion, the power of feeling that you have a voice, and its connection between culture, a societal culture, and it builds on what Leslie Ann talked about, and Claire and Bijna, around the corporate culture, because when we say something in a meeting and it's not heard, but when a male says the same thing and it is heard, it's a manifestation of bias and conscious bias probably, but the fact that sometimes we're just not heard. I wanted to summarize an interesting aspect of the conversation, and that is that, and that touches on the point you're making, Claire, about your colleague being asked to be the scribe in a meeting, or the point you were making, Bijna, about being asked to go and bring tea. But ultimately, really, this extends beyond those tasks, and often women are given tasks that are typically dead-end tasks that do not contribute to career progression. So we end up working all hours 7 days a week in order to complete those dead-end tasks, so that we have enough time to dedicate to those tasks that will make a difference. But if some women have caring responsibilities in addition, and they feel compelled to complete those dead-end tasks, then that will be a career derailing move. And this is something else that I think we need to call out.
It's exhausting. It's exhausting because then, you know, you're compensating in the workplace, but then at home too, and it's exhausting. And I think, you know, my advice, you know, if I could go back to my younger self, is kind of, you know, really kind of having those conversations with your partner early. In, you know, if you know you want your career to progress, you have those conversations early about what you expect and that, you know, it's 50-50 at home as well as, you know, it's 50-50 in the workplace. And, you know, I learned that probably a little bit later on in my career, but very lucky now to have a really supportive partner that because you can't do it all as a mother and as a career professional. And I also think, you know, going back to Grace's point about the I think it's generational as well as cultural, because the pressure on from my family, you know, once I went on maternity leave, it was, well, are you going to slow down now? And, you know, you're going to sort of stay at home? And I'm like, no, I'm not. So again, I think there's that kind of generational kind of bias that hopefully, as you know, the younger generations, that will kind of break down even further. But yes, it's exactly the point she made, the scribing, the tea making. You know, I don't know if anyone's heard of the term mansplaining, but certainly being in a room where, you know, men can sometimes sort of speak up and say, well, what she's trying to say is, when you've made that point already, you know, it's a very common terminology, but it's a thing, and it's really trying to that awareness piece, going back to the awareness piece and how you challenge that awareness and break down those barriers. So yeah, it's definitely still exists today.
For sure. Yeah, boosted and tasks. Definitely. Claire, thank you very much for this. Our panel members, I'd like to move on to the third question that we're tasked to reflect on, and that is really solution driven. Having had this conversation, what solutions should we as individuals take, as well as within as individuals, but also within our industries? Again, the floor is yours.
Can I go?
Of course, Leslie-Anne.
You know what? We all have biases, okay? It's a fact of life, but it's just being conscious of these biases and making people around us aware of these biases as well. So in starting, we can have the likes of, you know, the allies, the champions, the male change agents, you know, the female change agents out there who need to speak up. And sometimes there are other people that you see as well that cannot speak up for themselves. So when we see things like that, we shouldn't stay in silence. We should, you know, sort of call it out and also help them to build the confidence, help them to, you know, sort of channel their career path so that it's not sort of breaking their confidence, if you like, because sometimes you don't see them again. Who looks out for them? Who knows whether they've left or not? You don't know what impacted them in that way. So as individuals, I suppose, following in and checking in on people and sort of helping people, I suppose, in speaking up when they are not able to speak up from the individual perspective. From the organizational perspective, again, just assessing the environment with which, you know, the employees work, and just see, just, you know, cast your eye out, you know, having the senior leadership team being dedicated to looking out for these sort of things, to say, okay, it's just a lot of men or a lot of women, or, you know, whichever gender over here, we need a bit of a balance, you know, like Bijna was saying about C-suite executives, and I'll bring this back to next generations. You're asking the next gen, you know, to aspire and to look up to something. They're like, well, there is no woman out there, so who am I aspiring to? You mean, okay, find that director who is male to coach me. So how am I going to get up there if I don't see a woman up there? So basically helping with that perspective to bring C-suite executives in there, you know, a VP level, you know, a senior leadership level, so that the next generation can also see and aspire to it. again, you can't have that aspiration if you don't see, women, breaking grounds and, bringing fresh and cutting edge insights and, making an impact, because then you can bring people on the journey with you. And, promoting that is an issue. When organizations see that issue is there, sort of actually accepting the issue and doing something about it. Because there are a lot of stages where there are talks about improving the process. There are talks about, creating a gender balance, but nothing comes out of that. So it's actually saying we're going to take an action on this, we're going to take a stance on this, and we're going to implement. This is how we're going to implement it. To saying, okay, you said it, we've done. And hearing from the women who are experiencing this firsthand, there's no better place to find out about this than the people who are experiencing it, because they can come together to contribute to the solutions to solve the problem, because they're the ones feeling it firsthand. So I think these are some of the things where sort of individuals and organizations can do to sort of bridge the gap, I guess.
Thank you so much, Leslie Ann. I love the point you made around perspective taking, and the importance of having an understanding of lived experience. But I'm struck by the power of your voice and the strength of the messages that come through. Thank you. Who would like to comment on solutions from their point of view and their industries, perhaps? Claire?
So kind of to echo Leslie Ann, and well, everybody actually on the panel, it starts with awareness, and you've got three choices. You can challenge the situation, you can acquiesce and do nothing, or you can leave that situation and walk away. And the only way that you're going to get change and we're going to get societal change is that if we challenge, because if we acquiesce or if we leave, then nothing will change. So I think it's given confidence and strength across our network to challenge when we see bias. And that's not just for women, that's men and all genders and our allies and sponsors. So I think, that's those conversations one by one are so impactful. And I think organizations need to keep sharing this awareness and ways of how to challenge, because it's easy to say it, but how do you do it in a way that's not aggressive or seen as aggressive, or in a way where the other person understands and actually thinks and goes, oh, actually, I understand now. I understand the why. The why is so important. And I think organizations just need to continue their conversation to help understand the why and help others to coach one another when it comes to bias. And I think women do need to take themselves out of their comfort zone. I understand why sometimes women don't, and when they see that job opportunity and they only fit 6 out of the 8 competencies and they don't go for the job, whereas sometimes our male counterparts might fit 3 out of the 6 and go for the job. But I think they need to really think about just a way of taking themselves out of their comfort zone, because sometimes we don't lean in enough, and if we lean away or lean back, then we're not going to help ourselves and our opportunities. And I think just to kind of create that network of allyship in business is really important, and keep building that network and keep continuing that message. So I just think there's some of the ways that I think is really important to kind of change the kind of the environment of the culture that you're working in.
Thank you, Claire. I take one of the key points I take from this, which would be really interesting if we had examples to share, is this notion of not just being aware and speaking up and challenging, but us also knowing how to challenge and helping understanding, because let's not make a mistake about it. It takes courage.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in situations where I personally didn't have courage to call out outrageous behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked and paralyzed by shock.
Mm-hmm.
But calling out does take courage, and we are not armed or necessarily equipped with the interpersonal skills, or we've not been asked to develop those that require constructive challenging and organizational shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So on this point, we have Grace and Bijna. would you like to come in, either of you?
Yeah, of course.
Sure.
I think all three of you have said really, really important. You've addressed important ways, like the awareness, the fact that you need courage. Like, wow, this is amazing that you guys can share this, because definitely I agree with that. Like, once you get awareness, you can see it and say it. You know, once you are aware of the situation, and you can start talking about it with your colleagues, with your parents, with whoever you feel comfortable with, and you start uniting, you start making a group, you know. And it's amazing to see, for example, in Spain, we have manifestations. I think this is the word. I
Demonstration?
Pardon?
Demonstrations?
It's basically thousands and thousands of women and men
Yeah.
group up on the 8th of May, 8th of March. Yeah, March, to celebrate Women's Day. And we route around the streets. I think in the UK, I've never seen that. I don't know if it exists. But in Spain, it's amazing to see that every time it's growing, and we're not accepting it anymore. And it's so nice to see that. I've even seen it in my mum, that gradually during the years, she's actually stood her ground. And that's amazing to see that as a daughter, you know, because I don't have any experience at work, really. I have done it in Spain, but nothing to like share, really. But to see it in my mum, that's amazing. And I think that's because of the scream that we're doing behind the behind curtains. Yeah, if I can explain it like that. And I think individually, that's what we should do, like create awareness of it. Even like men, create awareness when they feel that there's bias and there's like not an equal situation. Because I don't know if you know, girls, that yesterday they gave out a new news in Spain that they've invested 20 million euros to support the politics in equality in Spain. 20 million. And you know, that's something, it warms my heart, because that means that there is already the politics and everyone is actually aware of it, and they are starting to move society to the right path. I don't know, I don't think there's nothing, you know, like in the UK, they actually write down what they're going to do with that money, right? In Spain, they don't do it like that. But at least it's there, it's out there, and people will seek for more guidance, for more help in these situations, and that's like amazing.
Thank you, Grace. Really important to invest in these policies at all levels, really. I know there have been some questions coming from our audience, and we're coming to the end of the session. So perhaps I think that through our concluding comments, we might be able to address some of those points. And what I would like to do from the panel is perhaps take one key message based on this conversation. If you were to summarize a key takeaway from the range of exchanges we've had, what would it be for you? What would it be for our audience? So, Claire, do you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually just looking at one of the questions about advice you give to someone moving from education into professional sphere. So I'm just going to touch on that so we help answer the question, because that's really important. It's really hard to know the culture of an organization until you're in that organization. So just make sure that you do your research, you really do research the values and see what's going on with that organization. We have a great YouTube channel at Enterprise. We had an event for International Women's Day yesterday. We had organizations like Deloitte, Network Rail, so women from very masculine industries coming together to talk about the networks they have within their organizations. And so, yes, I think just do your research, but once you start, just join those networks. There's plenty. Organizations do have some really great networking opportunities where you can build that network of allies and sponsors around you, which you need in any organization you go into.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have questions on role models and men being part of this conversation and facilitating transitions. Leslie-Anne, would you like to come in?
Yes, sure. I'd definitely say actions speak louder. And so for the male counterparts, when you see issues, they can become change agents. Like we said, there are so many networks as well where they can encourage, the different genders, I guess, and different people who have issues who can come up with it and sort of speak on their behalf of as well if they wish for them to. But I think there's some male counterparts as well who have coached people who are not confident to be able to do that. And they've also paved the way for people to know that there's an issue here and this is something that's persistent, so they can bring it to the table to say, you know what, this is something that needs to be addressed. So these are some of the things that I suppose our male counterparts or our male colleagues and friends can pick up to say, I'm going to take a stance and I'm going to support this woman in this direction, and I'm going to open doors and create opportunities and offers for these young women or these women in general to just sort of propel or do well in their careers as well.
Thank you so much, Leslie-Anne. Any more key takeaway or key point to conclude the session?
Yeah,
thank you so
definitely
much.
be the change that you want to see tomorrow. That's what I would say. And especially have a lot more courage and actually accept who you are and the voice that you've got, because you're on this earth for a reason. And for your voice to be minimized or for you to feel small isn't one of them. And especially like when you create awareness, because like it's really easy to be what's it called, ignorant. It's so easy to be that. And as soon as you see some comments or behavior where it's affecting you, speak about it and actually tell that person, because the more you leave it, the more that person will do it to other people as well. So I think it's important to address it, to be honest with that person, even though you're not seeing it in a wrong way. Just actually address it and just say, listen, I wouldn't like you to treat me like this, or whatever is the situation. So you prevent it in the future, and that person is aware. Because, like I said, not a lot of people. A lot of people just say, "Oh yeah, I know this." Oh yeah, but ignorance is out there, so it's important to speak up.
Yeah, I would just like to add one more thing
Thank
because
you
it's
so
something
much.
close to me. Just in the sense of
Okay.
the so sort of someone leaving education and coming into the work sector. I would also say don't be shy to make use of reverse mentorship, because in this way you can sort of speak about some of the biases that you're encountering maybe as a young professional or as a new professional, and get them voiced in that sense, because the senior leadership may not be aware of this. And Bijna has sort of highlighted how she does, chats, behind closed doors, and that just to try and exit sort of strategies to speak to people to understand why they're leaving. So I'm just saying to the young professionals, don't be shy to make use of reverse mentorships, because leadership teams always want to hear what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, and extremely valuable. And it touches on mentoring and role modeling, which was also an important thread in our conversations. May I just thank you all for voicing so clearly and so powerfully some of the challenges, some of the actions that are currently taking place, drawing on your experiences. It's actually quite moving and very powerful. So I'm ever so thankful to each and every one of you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts and views with us today. And with this, I shall close the session and thank our audience for taking the time to listen and take part.